I love this book of Nehemiah. This book, if you ever want to learn about leadership, this is the book to read. If you ever want to learn about how to bring change to organizations, to society, read this book. And if you ever want to learn about how do we serve and have a world view of serving, this is the book. Nehemiah was a cupbearer. The cupbearer's job was to sip the wine before the king sips it. And it was very unusual the way he would do it. In one hand, the right hand, the culture dictates, he would have the flask that had the wine, a goblet in his left, towel draped over his left arm. He'd come into the courtroom of the king, put the goblet down, pour into it, and then put the flask down, from the goblet, pour some into his left palm, and sip it. If it was poisoned, he'd keel over, and the king would know, don't drink that wine. How would you like that job as a cupbearer? And so that's Nehemiah's function. They were in the winter palace of the Persian king, which is in southwestern Iran. That's typically where it's located. It's just like when it's wintertime here in New Jersey, people of means, they fly to Florida and they stay there and they come back March or April. Don't you hate them? And so there they are hanging out in Florida while we're suffering. But the winter palace is in southwestern part of Iran. There's Nehemiah, and he had some kind of latitude, though he was a servant, a slave, to be able to host guests, perhaps in the private servants' quarters. There was Hanani and some other men who came from Jerusalem. The conversation gets very quiet, very personal, very valuable. Nehemiah poses a question. How are people back home? Hanani responds, the people back home, they're in a lot of trouble and they're filled with disgrace. Trouble speaks of their physical circumstance. See, when we capture the text and the meaning of the text, it's that they had just gone through another attack by the Babylonians that really put a stop to all of their rebuilding. And so their country looked war-torn. Disgrace speaks of their emotional state. So they had major lack, poverty. Major emotional lack, humiliation and disgrace. When Nehemiah heard this, the Bible says that he sat down, wept, fasted, mourned, and prayed before the God of heaven. It was the month Kislev, we read in verse 2, which is around November or December in our calendar year. Chapter 2, verse 1 tells us when he completed his time of fasting, mourning, and praying and weeping, it was the month Nisan, which is around March or April. So a span of 4 months, this man was messed up about what he heard. I want to put 2 questions to you today as we talk about the whole area of serving. Question number 1, what does God expect of me? That's what I want to know. What does God expect of me? Put a big gap now between the next question. It's this. How does God expect me to do what he expects?